Good morning and welcome Inside Fever Insider Live. Brian Haenchen, Tony East here with you. We are through the preseason and on to the regular season. But before we talk about the regular season, we have to talk about the preseason because that's just how things work nowadays. Chloe and Tony, how are you?
Doing good.
Was Chloe a part of this intro just now?
Yeah, I was wondering that. I thought you just said Tony.
I think he just said me and Hank. Let's go.
Wow.
I think I said oh my God, Cloney Peterson. I said
Wow.
Cloney Peterson at the top.
She's been skipped.
Yeah, wow. I see how it is.
And I'm just trying to send a message.
I was doing good before the betrayal.
Yeah, that's it.
It's preseason for all of us, everybody.
Yeah, that's right. Betrayal. I want more work on my platter. Bring it. We have lots to talk about. Obviously, we were talking before off air. This is going to be a big week with roster decisions coming. Fever have to make 3 cuts, and they can obviously bring one back for the developmental spot. We have some injury news, some injury returns, so near injury scare involving Caitlin Clark. So lots to talk about. Let's start with the good news, and that's the return of Aaliyah Boston, the return of Ty Harris. Chloe, you were there last night to watch them against the Nigerian national team, obviously. Don't want to read too much into it, but just generally, broadly speaking, how did Aaliyah and then more importantly, Ty Harris look upon their return?
Yeah, I mean, Aaliyah looked good. She, I believe she only played 10-ish minutes, but that's to be expected when you have a 70-29 halftime score. But yeah, she looked good. She was doing some playmaking. I think the biggest takeaway from the night for me was the inverted pick and roll where Caitlin Clark set the screen for Aaliyah Boston, who brought the ball up the floor. And post-game, Stephanie White talked about that as just something, they want to expand. Obviously, Boston became a bigger playmaker last year, somewhat out of necessity when their top 3 point guards were all hurt. And they want to continue to expand that to make their offense that much more dangerous. And when it comes to Ty Harris, she obviously played limited minutes as well. But in the minutes she played, I thought she looked good. She was part of some 3 small guard lineups for a while with, Harris, Mitchell, Clark, Harris, Mitchell, Johnson on the floor. Something, they wanted to try out. But, Steph White mentioned pregame as well that, she's seen a lot from Harris, both from her 2 years in Connecticut together in 2023-24 and through practices this preseason, that she's confident that Harris can get into a role with the team as she reintegrates.
Tony, with regards to Ty Harris, obviously one of the bigger signings, how do you see her fitting in with the lineup and with this group?
Well, actually, I first of all found it very interesting. Her post this morning. I don't know if you guys saw this, but just like really talking about how challenging her rehab actually was in response to a basketball trainer. And so she was really proud to be back on the floor last night. And of course, a very meaningful return in any way. But yeah, I think that they've clearly identified what they hope their non-Clark Mitchell backcourt players are. Good defenders, pesky defenders in particular, who can at least run a little bit. Both of them can. Raven really has in these preseason games. And they got that with Ari McDonald last year. And that was the most successful backup guard I think they've had since they drafted Caitlin Clark. And I think that these two might be better, basically are better defenders than Ari. So really fascinated to see how that actually plays out rotationally when they actually have everybody playing the real minutes they expect to play. But at least so far, the fit for those players seems very natural to me.
Chloe, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Tony. Obviously, Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, very offensive-driven players. So it makes sense to bring in a defensive-minded guard like Raven Johnson and Ty Harris that can kind of balance that out. And you can obviously have a full defense-heavy backup backcourt with Johnson and Harris, or you can kind of put one of them in for the other if you need a little bit of offense, a little bit of defense. I think it'll work well as they figure out rotations.
Staying just with the guard position, Caitlin Clark has the injury scare. What was it? She banged her knee against the Dallas Wings, left the game. Starters are probably going to leave the game anyway.
Yeah.
Confirmed yesterday, everything's fine, hunky-dory and good. But it's always fun to get that first scare out of the way at the beginning of the preseason.
Yeah.
I actually thought, to your point about that, though, like Steph's point about actually having something painful happen for the first time after such a long rehab being like an actual big hurdle to get over, I actually found that very revealing and interesting. even if it's obviously not a good thing to bang your knee against the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably good. Obviously, I'm not a basketball player, so I haven't experienced that. But I would think it's good to, relearn what, okay, this hurts in the moment, but I'm fine, feels like.
Yeah.
Because banging her knee, it looked like it just hurt really bad in the moment, and then she just walked it off. So obviously she's fine. She didn't have any tape or anything on her knee last night. She played as normal. I think she only played 14 minutes. No starter played over 15 minutes and didn't play at all in the second half yesterday. So yeah.
Yeah, and to your point, yeah, it's kind of like a football player coming off an injury, just kind of getting that first hit out of the way, just to remind you that you're going to be okay and to force you over that mental hurdle. That was a good observation by Stephanie White. I'm glad you mentioned that, Tony.
Here's what I would tell the common person. Whenever you get a new keyboard at work that's like a smaller size than your previous one and you suck at typing for a day, right? That is the equivalent of a basketball player getting a minor injury. It's much harder to do normal things for just a little bit. So get that challenge out of the way, and then you're good to go.
I'm clipping that off and putting that on our socials to promote this episode. That was brilliant.
We all deal with challenges every day.
That was so good. I love that. On the less good injury news front, Monique Billings ankle. Chloe, you're there. You can describe what happened, but Stephanie White after the game, she's going to be reevaluated today. What did you see, and what's your level of concern with Monique Billings?
Yeah, I mean, she landed on, a Nigerian player's foot under the basket. I mean, she didn't look to be in immense pain. I was honestly confused when it first happened because she was kind of just sitting there while the play went to the other end of the court. And then when, the next dead ball after that play on the other end of the court, she just got up, limped to the bench, and then sat on the bench for a second, then went back to the locker room. Then after, honestly, a minute or two, came back to the bench and just sat at the end of the bench for the rest of the game. And it was one of those things where, as of now, I don't know if there's too much concern about it. Just considering it's preseason, she was able to walk off the floor under her own power. She didn't need any help, really. She was just limping a bit. But obviously, Steph White said they're going to reevaluate today because, with ankle injuries, especially too, they can puff up overnight. They can swell. Who knows what can happen to ankle injuries overnight. So they're just going to give it a little bit and then see where she is today.
My only addendums would be, actually, you nailed the one I was going to say, but ankles are the biggest one in terms of how much the swelling the next day changes what can be the diagnosis. We have no idea how big her ankle is today, but she's posting thanks for the B-Day wishes on the feed. So I think she's probably mostly good. I don't think you're excited about your B-Day wishes if your ankle's really beat up the next day.
Tony East, social media correspondent.
That's how I can add and help today without being at the game. I can get on social media during this and be like, hey, see, everything's great. Here's what they're saying.
Also, feel free to pop in and send us questions, comments, things like that. Praise our friend Tony East. I love this one. My man Tony East. Let's go Fever. I think the more creative playmaking this year now that we got the core back for year 2 with White. Just to go off on a tangent, I would agree. I think that we're going to see a little more of that creativity, and Stephanie White's alluded to that, wanting to up the pace, and probably won't see a ton of it. Saw a little bit of it during the preseason, but obviously you don't want to tip your hand too much. But I'm interested to see what the product looks like next Saturday against the Wings.
Well, when someone tried to ask Steph about the inverted pick and roll yesterday, she went, shh. But that was really the only takeaway from the game. So
this quote has stuck with me for I don't know if you guys are like this, but one quote someone says sticks with you for way too long. But last year, Steph was asked about at one of their practices on the main court, how much different it's been building out her playbook because they've had so many new players. This was very late in the regular season, right? So they've had all these hardship players in, and she answered the question, but then she was also also in year 1 as a coach, it's hard to make your playbook very expansive because you're literally installing it from square one. And so the implication was in year 2, there is just more broadening you can do from the base that you set in year 1. So obviously they have a different team. They have 5, 6, whatever developmental spots, maybe more. 7 new players, but they have 7 returning players. So I do even just naturally think health plus a second year with the same head coach will lead to more creative everything, honestly, on the offensive end. Anyway.
No, sorry, I was waiting. I wasn't sure if Chloe was going to move because sometimes she's on tape delay. She looked like she was ready to pounce in and off her own hot take, but she wasn't. I know that this was an interesting situation, the Justine Pissott injury. Lower leg held out of the Dallas game. At the time, Stephanie White said, I know she was having some issues. I know she had some stuff collegiately as well. She's going to see the doctor, so I don't know exactly what it is. But again, it's early, so we'll take things as they come and make sure that she gets the attention and the time that she needs. A very vague, very I don't know answer, which was maybe a little concerning if that's the right word. And then yesterday offered a little clarification, so that they hope to have her returning to the court within a week or so. Chloe, I know that you have thoughts on all this and how it's handled and just the situation in general, so I'll let you take it away and we'll follow.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously very vague at the beginning. On Thursday it was. And, she said at the time she had no idea the timeline, which could have been really anything from a sprain that's a week to recover from to, a torn ACL that she's out for the year. Like, we had no idea, really. So it was good that we were able to get a little bit of clarification on Saturday for, a week or so. It rules out a lot of major injuries, obviously. And that's also something she said she hopes a week or so that's not set in stone. She mentioned that Pissott has some more return appointments kind of before they're sure she can go forwards. But, just having that rough timeline makes it a lot more clear of what they're dealing with in terms of severity.
Interesting timing for her too, because the Thursday night, their second preseason home game was her last day within the 14-day window after her development deal, where she could have in theory signed somewhere else. So now she's in this like kind of vague period where she's under contract, but also is able to sign with another team technically, and she's hurt. It's really interesting to see all this kind of coalescing, and it's not good for her to be hurt right now. Obviously, I was actually very intrigued by her skill set, so a bit of a bummer she couldn't play more in the preseason.
The conspiracy theories are out there. I'm not trying to give them validity, but I am curious to hear how you all debunk them and the idea or buy into them. The idea of trying to hide a player from the other so that she doesn't get picked up.
I mean, I'll start. My thought on that is other teams, opposing teams, are not going to listen to what, the player's head coach says necessarily. They're going to go to Pissott's agent and say, what's up? And the agent will say, here's what's up. And then they'll take that and they'll decide if they want to try to sign her to their 12-player roster or, if they want to offer her and stuff like that. I don't think they're taking, what Stephanie White says pregame as the cold hard truth, or just like, not even that, just the end all be all per se. They're going to go and they're going to make their calls and talk to other people.
Dude, also, if these teams wanted Justine Pissott, they could have drafted her.
Yeah.
They know how she played in college. It's not like this is some revelation or huge changing surprise from the impression they had of her however many days ago. So I guess I understand, because this is such a unique situation where they're signed to one team but can still sign with another. But no, I do not think there's any grand theory about all of this.
I also think that, at least at the beginning, with developmental spots being so new, teams are going to they're gonna prioritize getting the players that they've had in training camp for the last 2-3 weeks.
Agreed.
They're just gonna, the players they've waived, like obviously Golden State waived Marta Suarez. Their aim is probably to sign her to a development spot, assuming she clears waivers. So I think all these teams with the new development spot and all these new rules, at the very least, they're going to be prioritizing the players they've developed in 2-3 weeks of training camp over players that they could just bring in.
And to Tony's point, it's not like she suddenly magically just appeared on everybody's radars and now they're suddenly with her. I mean, she's a second-round pick, so everybody had a crack at her. And plus, there's ample film from her college days, so you know what skill set she brings. And there are also opportunities to try and grab her or express interest in her even before this, or once camp started. So, yeah, I'm sure that stuff happens sometimes, but I don't think this one's it. Let's see here. Somebody else we wanted to talk about in our notes, Michaela Timson. We wanted to talk about her after the first game. Chloe, I think you said when we were talking off air that she looked more confident. Had a good game there against Dallas, and then last night played some solid minutes again. But just KK and kind of her evolution and the steps that you've seen from her already early on in her second season.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is just confidence. She's just being more confident in her shots. She's not second guessing before, making those difficult shots or attempts. And I think that comes with she has a year under her belt with the Fever. Then she played overseas. She was in the Unrivaled development pool. So I think a lot of development or just a lot of confidence comes with this isn't necessarily new to her anymore. Like, she knows how to act as a WNBA player. She knows what it's like to be a pro, and she can, now that she has that baseline, she can just keep improving on other things.
I think there are some games too where her activity just pops so much. And like in a game like last night's where they're winning by 1 billion, it's kind of dying in terms of not interest or anything like that, but just like, okay, the game is decided. It's like, oh, this person's getting every rebound and is jumping higher than anybody for every loose ball. It's like, oh yeah, that's a very exciting, composed player. I'm looking forward to seeing what she does. I'm at one of the most, like, if we do preseason general takeaways, I'm kind of upset that the Billings injury made it so there was never a game with the full front court available to really know how Stephanie White's going to prioritize these minutes, because all of them had some successes and failures along the way, but they never were all healthy at the same time outside of 6 minutes to start one game that they demolished their opponent in. Yay, very helpful.
On that note, Tony, you think Cunningham starts to begin the regular season?
I don't know, because that's like a challenge without Hall playing to know that answer. I would have assumed it would have, I don't know. Would you have assumed before any preseason games it would have been Lexi Hall?
Yeah, just based off how the offseason went, obviously Lexi signing a longer deal, a larger deal, like just based only on that, I would have assumed it would have been her starting over Cunningham. But kind of at this point with Hull missing all 3 preseason games, I wonder if it's at least at the beginning of the season, Cunningham got all of the reps preseason within the rotation. So does she start to begin the season just because they have that familiarity already?
Sophie is the more consistent shooter of the two, and that obviously fits with any other group of 4 players around her. But Hull's defense being as good as it is what makes her like the right player next to Caitlin Aaliyah Kelsey to me, which is why I assumed she'd be the one. And not to be like the politician WNBA guy, but you cover sports for a long time. The player who got paid more is probably the one who's going to start generally at first. That's not like a hard and fast rule forever, but like at first. So I would have assumed it was going to be Lexi Hall, but yeah, Sophie's actually played in the games, and that matters. And it's not like a huge drop off in impact in any way. They just have different skills. So I don't think that's like a problem if that's what it is, but that's certainly not what I would have expected. And that is the only position group we didn't get to evaluate it at all. I mean, it was actually kind of challenging in some ways to see what the rotation is going to look like because of how often they had 3 guard lineups on the floor out of necessity, right? Like that's probably not going to happen when they're healthy, but who knows how healthy they'll actually be. And I, by the way, was the wing depth loser the entire free agency period. And I feel very vindicated after the preseason, even though it wasn't like a huge issue with these games.
Wing depth loser is amazing.
I was so like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like there wasn't a huge conversation that they had all these guards or, people were really concerned about the front court. Like those are worthy topics of discussion. I was like, they have 2 wings. Like, why is this not being talked about a lot? They only have 2 on the whole team. Anyway.
Would you expect, probably fair to say that regardless of who starts, the minutes between Sophie, Cunningham, Lexi Hall are probably going to be about even most nights?
Yes. I think that's fair. Yes.
Yeah. And it is a good trade-off, too, because you bring Lexi Hall in off the bench, you get that defensive boost to kind of get things going if you need it. That's a nice little weapon to have off the bench potentially there when you have her and Raymond Johnson to plug and play there at different positions, obviously. So that could be a positive there as well. Cuts this week, as we mentioned there at the top, the Fever are going to have to cut 3, but they can bring 1 back on a developmental spot. So 2-1 or 2-for-1 or whatever. Chloe, you seem to think that you have an idea of how this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to start out, the brass tacks of it is they're going to have to, on paper, waive all 3 of their cuts. And it kind of happened, obviously, yesterday with Golden State, waiving Marta Suarez, as I already said. I assume their intention is to bring her back on a development pick or a development pool contract, but you have to waive them and then allow them to clear waivers before you can sign them to a development pool contract. So, whenever the cuts happen, I would guess early this week, but it could be any time. They are going to waive 3 people. And I mean, my guess based on, what we've seen over the preseason and how they've kind of done rotations, my guess would be it would be Megan McConnell, Kiana Traylor, and Jessica Timmons being waived. And then obviously once if/when those players clear waivers, they can bring one of them back. But I don't know if you have any other differing thoughts on who's going to be waived, Tony, but that's just what I thought based on the rotations they did in the preseason throughout the first half. Obviously, the other pick or the other, one would be Shatori Walker-Kimbrough, like kind of at the end of the bench, but she's been pretty embedded in the first half rotation, and I think the other 3 haven't.
Yeah, any camp deal, you're immediately at least thinking they could be in the mix, and Shatori had that, but she was legitimately good in these preseason games, right? And they clearly identified and said, I think Kelly Krauskopf said this on the radio. I'm not exactly sure if I remember that correctly, but like they wanted a veteran player right before they signed her. Like that was their admittance. So that is that alone is a valuable trade. And then she also played basketball well. Like that also matters. So I don't even think that's like a consideration for them. So I would agree with you that it's the 3 clearly not outside the picture, but like the ones who played the least and were the least impressive of anyone fighting for a spot would be the 3 to get cut. That said, though, if I'm them, we don't see everything, which is always an important note of clarity, obviously. Maybe in practice scrimmages, one of these players looks completely exceptional, but generally the one that you just use a draft pick resource on, I would say would be a leader in tie-breaking scenarios generally. And in my own opinion, I'm curious what you guys think, of the times we actually could see them playing, I thought Timmons was the best of the 3. She was particularly useful against New York in that first preseason game. So if they have their pick of who gets the developmental spot, I would think Timmons would be the one after those cuts. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I don't think there's going to be much waiver wire action.
Yeah.
I mean, there never really is at the end of the preseasons because obviously everybody's waiving people. So it could be a little bit more this year. But I'm not sure. I don't think I saw someone ask this in the chat as well. From my understanding, you cannot pick someone up off waivers to sign them to directly to the development pool. You have to wait for them to clear waivers and then sign them to the development pool. Because if you're picking someone off waivers, you are putting them on the 12-player roster.
You inherit their existing contract, which is a real contract, not a development contract. Yes, right. So they would not, you can't give them a new deal and claim them at the same time. That'd be pretty sick, but no, that's not allowed.
So the Fever can pick up the player and add her to the developmental roster, but they have to clear waivers first. You can only pick a player up off waivers if you add them to the 12-player roster. So
one last topic of talking. This probably also going to be boring because I think there's a pretty clear answer, and Tony mentioned it before the show, before we get to the Q&A, which everybody can get involved in the YouTube chat. But biggest winner of the preseason, Tony, you gave the best answer, so I will let you take the lead on it, and then Chloe and I will just fall in line.
Yeah, it's got to be Raven Johnson, right? I mean, just an absolute baller in every way. I mean, immediately looks like a useful player. Steals all the time, pesky, and I love that. Like she runs very fast, like and the end line, but like in the half court, she kind of like skips and cuts and ducks in and out of the play. It's so interesting the way she plays. Made shots, made good passes. The exact defender they need her to be, even if she's not playing that much because they value Harris more than her. It's still like the perfect fourth guard to have. And I think they already would trust her more than they did 2 weeks ago because she had not played yet for them. So huge winner that she was legitimately good in every single game and minute she played.
I would agree with Tony. Obviously, I think, with the number 10 pick, it's always, you're not going to get a starter right away necessarily, but sometimes you don't know what you can get, like in how they immediately, just translate to the pros. And I think Raven Johnson has been surprising in the fact that she has looked extremely comfortable immediately. Like even against New York, she looked very comfortable, and going in these next games against Dallas, against the Nigerian national team, she's just looked and acted like how a pro should, in her first, 2 weeks since becoming a pro. So I think she's going to be, assuming she continues to ascend the way she has, I think she's going to be very good.
If I had to give a second answer, it'd be Shatori, just that she was as competent as she was. Not that I thought she'd be like bad, but she was also, okay, like you're still a legitimately useful player.
Who else has stood out to you, Chloe? Who has impressed you?
I'm trying to think.
Sorry, Chloe, I'm cutting you off. I feel like there's a lot of players you could say like in one game they were impressive, but the two we've said were the two that every game exceeded expectations, I would say, whereas most of the rest had like a choppy moment and a great moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I was going to say like Kelsey Mitchell obviously looked good all 3 games, but that's what we've come to expect from Kelsey Mitchell. Caitlin Clark looked good all 3 games. It was good that she, was able to get back into the WNBA, just full. That obviously she played with FIBA, but as Steph White mentioned, after New York, they guard her differently in FIBA versus the WNBA. So it was good for her to have these 3 games, or I guess only 2 games against WNBA teams, but it was good for her to have those games to just get back into the swing of things, and obviously come out without any serious injury is always a win for the Fever.
Have these 3 preseason games changed your expectations one way or the other for this team as they gear up for the start of the regular season? Chloe, I'll let you start.
Can you repeat the question?
Has what you've seen from this team in 3 preseason games, has that changed your expectations personally for this group, either positively or negatively? And I guess camp too, because obviously we're in practices a little bit. But
I don't think so. I think the expectations have always been high for them, and I think, with Aaliyah Boston coming back yesterday too, like she looked very comfortable. She obviously only played 10 minutes, and it was against the Nigerian national team, which is not to the caliber of a WNBA team, so you have to take it all with a grain of salt. But I think Aaliyah Boston coming back yesterday showed also how Steph White wants to open up the playbook in a little bit of a way and like just become more creative, because obviously, as Tony mentioned, it's hard to get a big playbook in year one, and especially with Steph White's year one, you have Caitlin Clark out for all but 13 games. So you have your main playmaker just not available for your entire first year. So that really restricted their playbook. So I think it'll be interesting to see how, with a healthy core, they will just become more creative in that playbook.
It's hard to say a ton of change takeaways without Hall playing at all, and with Boston playing 10 minutes out of 120, right? Like it's hard to really know what was different than I thought would be the case. But if I had to say anything, I would say their offense might honestly be a little better than I thought, which was already going to be exceptionally good. They missed a ton of shots against Dallas. That's not a great thing, but like their core players didn't play the whole second half. But I will say that I think they could be a top 3-4 team in the league. I think most people do. Their defense is going to have to be better than it was in the preseason, and it was a little worse than I thought it might be, but that's why I said what I said at the beginning. Like their 2 best projected starter defenders played a combined 10 out of 120 minutes. Like what am I even saying if I'm criticizing their defense? Like, am I wasting my breath even doing so? Which does make it a little hard to kind of like really zoom out and say anything about like team level stuff. But in general, no, I don't think what I expect them to be has changed much.
Yeah. Let's jump into some Q&A time. Let's see. This is a question presented as a statement, but we've got the question from a few other people. This team doesn't need 5 guards. They have a legit 6'4" on a developmental contract, and Marta Suarez just got cut, another 6'3" forward who can stretch the floor. Posing that as a question, somebody else asked if the Fever would look at a player like Suarez, who was waived yesterday by the Valkyries.
Has Marta Suarez played in the preseason? This is a real question for Golden State.
She played one preseason game, if I remember correctly.
I only say this as like a blind spot of my own, but like I have never seen her play internationally. I have never seen her play in the WNBA. Like I don't know how good she is. If she's actually 6'3" and can stretch the floor, I'm surprised that like no one would pick her before the second round, and then she's going to be on a developmental contract, right? I'm not saying that to say she's bad or anything. I have no idea how good she is, but I mean, if you think she's better than one of their guards as the Fever, yeah, you would try to get her, but they also could have drafted her. And that trade was so weird though. Like that whole like it almost feels like Golden State, like they weren't, obviously every trade is made under your own volition, but it almost feels like they were like under duress in some ways with how it was like talked about afterwards. So it's just kind of weird. So if she's actually as good as like it's been talked about, I guess you consider it, but I have legitimately no idea. If anyone has her preseason numbers, that would be helpful.
She played in the preseason opener against Seattle on April 25th. Tallied 5 points, 3 rebounds, and assist, and a steal in 14 minutes of action.
Okay, there you go.
So the coaches spoke highly of her when she left. She said Marta is fierce. She's fearless. She has a very high basketball IQ. Her character's off the charts. That was from draft night.
Revenge game in her first preseason game. You love to see that.
Yeah, I feel like she'd be a great fit. That was such a curious trade in the moment, and then the way that it's played out, obviously they're getting blasted for it, and it adds to the bizarreness of the entire thing. Chloe, thoughts?
If you're that down on the draft or Flage, just say it. Like they talked about, they were like, oh, we can't get into our intentions. Just kidding. We're going to leak it to the press and then answer the question completely differently the next day. I was like, what happened? You made the trade. You clearly thought it was something good to do. I don't get why they were doing that.
Yeah, I don't. I've stopped trying to know why they did that. But I think, obviously, as you both alluded to, if they thought Marta Suarez was going to be, high, they could have picked her at number 10 too. Like, I think obviously they have Pissott at 6'4". Yeah, she's on a developmental contract. She can play up to 12 games. And if they decide they need her more, they can convert her to a standard contract. So I think I feel like the signing of Shatori Walker-Kimbrough is kind of more of a culture thing. I know, my first year covering the Fever, Lynn Dunn always said, spots 10, 11, 12 on the Fever are those culture fits. They're not going to see that much time on the floor. So you want to make sure more than anything that they are good in the locker room. They're good culture fits. And I think that's what they are emphasizing with Shatori Walker-Kimbrough. She's a veteran. She's won a championship. She can be that veteran voice in the locker room, even if she doesn't get that much time on the floor.
Spinning off of that, and this is another one that we've seen a few times, but just the need for depth in the size department. And Ken Swift says, so Chloe, you don't think with Ravens' performance, Shatori isn't as much of a need? You don't think they would cut her for another big? Seems like the Fever need rebounding.
I mean, obviously, as I just said, I think Shatori's probably the 11th or 12th spot on the team. Nobody in the 11th or 12th spot is going to get a lot of minutes. It could be, you could have another big, but, they're not going to get a lot of minutes, if any. So I think, obviously, from the Fever's perspective, they want that veteran voice in the locker room to, help just the younger players who are going to have more of, a role on the court. Tony, I don't know if you have another opinion on that, though.
No, that's fair. And I think if they want a Suarez or a wing, they could decide, okay, we have 5 bigs. We can cut a big. I think we can all guess that would be Demiris. If they feel like they have too many guards because one's not playing, I think we can all guess that would be Shatori. They have ways they can pivot if the roster sees needs during the season. So I suppose that is a reasonable way of Shatori's in the question. Yeah, that's possible if they get into the season and feel like they need more rebounding. Ken, it's an interesting question because again, this happened to me last season too. Everybody was talking about their rebounding after free agency. I very rarely have been wow, they stunk at grabbing the ball tonight. You know what I mean? That might be me. Like, I might be wrong. I think rebounding is very often misconstrued as a difference when it's really like they played Dallas in their second preseason game, and Dallas shot 55% and the Fever shooting 40%. So obviously Dallas is getting more rebounds. They have way more chances to get rebounds. There's more missed shots coming from the other team. Like, that's what that difference was to me. So don't get me wrong. I think they're maybe a little undersized in the front court, but I still have yet to be like, wow, they have such terrible rebounders on the team. So if anything, to me, again, beat my dead horse, the wings. If they can get a wing, maybe they would cut one of these players. But I think right now, no, I don't think that's something they would do. But Ravens in play to certainly change their thinking, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I think Pissott, obviously she's listed as a guard. She plays the 3-4. So she's she's that, break glass in case of emergency depth at wing, in my opinion, just to have on a developmental contract when they, because obviously Shatori Walker-Kimbrough can't be on a developmental contract because it's 3 years or less, I believe.
Correct.
So I think in the Fever's eyes, it makes the most sense to have Justine, who is obviously still transitioning from college to the pros, on this developmental contract, and then, Shatori Walker-Kimbrough, Michaela Timson kind of on the standard contracts.
Fun fact, the Fever were top 4 in the league last year in offensive rebounds per game at 8.8. That's good for 4th. Rebounding, they a little bit below the midway line.
They're like 9th, I believe, per game
in the league.
Right?
Yeah, let me check. 1, 2, 3.
Our good old friend
9th.
WNBA Advanced Stats page is just nuked into existence, apparently.
It's still broken. I've kind of...
It's hard to use stat pages right now.
Yeah.
Are there games going on, or people might wanting to use this information? Man, what a good time to redo that page.
I like this comp to Chloe's point. I'm assuming about players towards the end of the month. A Sydney Colson type roster spot, somebody that veteran leadership experience.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Great comparison right there.
Emma Cannon got that spot for years. Like, there are lots of players who make valuable sense for that.
Damiris Dantas really shot the lever off the ball yesterday. If she shoots even close to that, it's going to be nice. Damiris Dantas thoughts.
I mean, I agree with. I think it was 4 for 6 from 3 last night, if I believe. Obviously, you have to take everything with a grain of salt because it was Nigerian national team, as I mentioned, not to the caliber of a WNBA team. But I think, if anything, obviously still not to the caliber, but these are the types of games that can give players like Damiris Dantas a lot of confidence going into the regular season. Obviously, she had a down year from 3 last year, but kind of shooting like this going into the regular season could be a confidence booster she needs.
And boy, did she need a confidence booster after Thursday's shooting performance. So it's like her entire career summed up in the preseason. One excellent shooting game where you're like, how does this player not play 20 minutes a night? And one game where you're like, this player cannot make a single shot. Why is she playing at all? So whichever one of those versions they get will be very important this year.
Do you think Billings and Lexi Hall will be ready for game 1?
Chloe, you got to do that one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily have the answer to that question at this time. I mean, we'll talk to Steph White tomorrow about Billings. I think that's the bigger question mark at this point, just with how her ankle reacts to swelling and everything that happens after an ankle tweak, ankle injury. So, I mean, Lexi Hull, too, is kind of a question mark because, Steph White mentioned she mentioned, before the New York game that if it was a regular season game, Lexi Hull would have played. But then she also said she hoped to get her minutes against Nigeria, and that did not happen. So we're left kind of wondering, is the hamstring issue worse than, what they originally thought, or is it still precautionary in measure? So we'll try to get more answers about that this week.
Practice-wise, Lexi's been moving around. I mean, for the sections that we see, she's been moving around fine. She's doing some cutting. She's doing some pull-up shooting. She's doing all the things. So take it, I guess, a little bit with a grain of salt. But it's not like she's completely immobilized at practice.
Yeah.
She's doing things.
She's been practicing as normal. She's available to talk to media at practice, which, if they're following the media rules, means she's playing 5-on-5. So, so I think my inclination is it's precautionary, but hamstring injuries can be fickle.
I've never had any impression that hers was that bad either for the availability reasons that you've said throughout camp. But I was, after Steph said whatever day that was this week that players weren't going to play Thursday but then were on Saturday, this is on me to be clear, but I incorrectly assumed that included Lexi Hall playing on Saturday. So I at least did one of these chin scratchers that she did not play and the other two players did. But I, like you, would not expect anything major from that. We have no idea on Billings, obviously. Yeah. But you have way more insight than I do. So go Chloe.
Let's hear a quick one for Chloe. This one should be a softball for you've learned these rules inside and out from the unsigned CBA. Do developmental players practice to travel with the team? Will they be on the bench for every game but can only play up to 12?
Yeah, I mean, they'll participate in all team activities. I would imagine, at least at home, they'll be on the bench. They practice, obviously. I'm not entirely sure about traveling. I don't know if you know, Tony, but they participate in all team activities. So I would lean towards yes, but I'm not entirely sure.
My suspicion would also be yes, because they're allowed to practice on the road even, right? So you should want to have them there. And like let's be hypothetical, but let's pretend they're on a 4-game road trip and in the first game, someone gets hurt and they need that player immediately to like be active in the next game. So I think even if they're not listed as active, they'll be allowed to sit on the bench in street clothes or whatever version of clothing they're wearing that day. So I think I would assume, granted, I'm using the word assume, but given how NBA 2A contracts work as well, it's pretty similar, that they will, yes, be allowed to travel, be on the bench, be around. But it will be very clear when they're active and available versus not.
Probably going to land the plane here with this one. What about the officiating? Do you think the refs are actually calling freedom of movement and landing space fouls will continue through the regular season? We've heard this before, so I'm hesitantly hopeful. What have you made of the officiating so far in those calls specifically?
I mean, obviously the only one we saw was the landing space call on Caitlin from the Wings game. But, she mentioned post-game that, there was a committee this offseason. Steph mentioned that as well at Media Day, that there was a committee on, refereeing and refs being better. And Steph at the time, she said something along the lines of, we had these meetings. I don't know if they're actually going to come to fruition, but I mean, based on the first 3 preseason games, I think, it looks better so far. I mean, it's always a question of if they will continue to be better, and there can obviously be one game where it's really bad, one game where it's really good. And, it just depends on the refs you get that specific night.
It always depends with these new rules. Like sometimes they're focused on them almost too much at first. It's like you never know where it's actually going to settle in after they have done it for a while or it becomes habit or things of that nature. But there were a couple screen fouls called that I thought, okay, I don't recall that being, what they were calling last year, which is good. Like that's helpful for freedom of movement things. It's helpful for chasing players around, things like that. But yeah, the most obvious one was the Caitlin foul that we saw, and she right away was like, yep, refs were great. That was fouled correctly, as we saw on the replay. She got hit on the arm and got landed under 2 for 2. You're getting the free throws. You're keeping the ball. So I'm a bad ref answer guy because I barely ever notice stuff like that. But if the players like it better, I will take their word for it and say, yeah, so far so good. But we'll have to see when the games actually start. Yes, things can obviously change very quickly in the WNBA.
Yeah. Anything else we need to touch on before we call it a Sunday?
I don't think so.
I also don't think so.
Anything big in the works you want to promote, Tony?
No, I just put up a mini feature about Maisha Hines-Allen yesterday in which 2 seconds apart, Stephanie White called her a mother hen and Shatori Walker-Kimbrell called her a linebacker. So quite the dichotomy of a human, Maisha Hines-Allen.
Well, she's got everything. Whatever you need from her, she's got it.
She is fascinating. And she expanded on, fans will certainly love this part, the Fever's past pursuit of her in free agency 4 years ago, and Caitlin's wanting her on the team. So, fun stuff.
Fantastic. Folks should check that out. Chloe, you have a Sunday Blueprint story coming at some point this week, don't you?
Yes.
This is like Chloe finding out. She had a Reddit AMA in the middle of last week's show. So you have a big story coming up on the Fever off-season training camp and everything leading into the season, right?
Yes, I do. I'm trying to – it might be posted today. If not today, next Sunday. But I would think it would be today because next Sunday the season started. So look out for it.
Look at that.
Nobody promotes herself quite like Chloe. It's touching how humble she is. The Reddit AMA, this big Sunday feature. You're doing great. Chloe will have coverage all week from practice. I'll be there a few days as well, and then we're going to be all hands on deck, I would assume, for the season opener. I think we'll probably talk in between then, some combination of the three of us, probably with Tony because he's just so great. And yeah, we thank you all so much for watching. We'll be back with you again here at some point this week. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications to be notified when we go live. Follow everybody on Twitter, go read our stuff, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.